Misa was some treasurer will blame previous governments, and I take responsibility of what we have done in our government, and many of those who are sitting on the other side were my ministers in my government. But not one of them are men enough to stand up and take responsibility, you know. Our governments are not run by one person, it's run by our parliament. But they continue, and thank you for stepping and intervening on my behalf. Because Treasurer continues to keep on blaming me. He thinks, why are you in business? I've been in business for over 40 years, Mr. Speaker. 40 years when I left university. Mina gona, si want the contract with the government. I didn't ask the Prime Minister to write me a check when he was my finance minister. Let me assure you that. I've been in private sector for 40 years. So, you know, you can rebut that. You've been investigating for the last 3 years and you found nothing because I never asked you for nothing, Mr. Speaker. But you saw it. There's a kind of blame game here. There's a kind of blame game here. You take ownership. You've been in government for 3 years.
Honorable
Take ownership. Thank you, Yuta Solia. Let's you in the second intervention. So, you know can worry about the talk.
You can continue
But me talk.
discussion.
If to talk about budget repair, one time member stop the repairing budget. Because, Mr. Speaker, this is probably third budget and probably another 2 or 3 supplementary budgets that he has presented, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, he has to take some responsibility of the performance of the economy of our country. Today, when he's talking about budget repair, let me highlight to you, Mr. Speaker. This is 3 years of consecutive high deficits in our budget. 3 years of record consecutive high deficits. Mr. Speaker, also, this year and the last year, and the year before when COVID was in our country, unemployment is at record levels, Mr. Speaker. At record levels. But minimum wages is still at its lowest. There are a lot of families out there who are hurting, Mr. Speaker. But today, as government continues to print money and borrow money from the central bank, the interest rates are going up. That is the fact. The biggest expenditure, now the third biggest expenditure of this budget is repayment to central bank. Because the cost of borrowing money there is much higher than the concessional loans that we get from ADB and all the Exim banks around the country and Australia. That is a fact, Mr. Speaker. You look at the numbers that you print. The third biggest expenditure of this budget is payments to repay treasury bills. So, Mr. Speaker, when you do borrow that kind of money, what happens is that you stop growth in the private sector because banks become lazy, super funds become lazy. They buy treasury bills, they buy treasury bonds, and they don't lend money to private sector. And when they don't lend money to private sector, Mr. Speaker, what happens is that private sector does not grow and does not build a business, unemployment becomes prevalent. That's what we are facing today. And Mr. Speaker, instead of addressing this kind of core issues in the country, the Treasurer is saying, I'm still continuing to budget repair. And Mr. Speaker, let me say this. Today, interest rates in our country remain high. All you have to do, Mr. Speaker, is ring the central bank and they'll tell you what government is borrowing from them. On a short-term loan, 12 months, 24 months, 5-year, 10-year loans that they are getting from the central bank. The government is the biggest borrower. To fund this budget, Mr. Speaker, you will borrow more money from the central bank because nobody else is going to lend you money. And all it does is put pressure in our economy, where private sector, SME, agriculture, all our small businessmen and women cannot borrow money because the banks are lazy. They are not forced to lend money. They are lending money to central bank because they're getting much easier interest rates. So, Mr. Speaker, one of the other reasons is that inflation continues to grow. It remains very high. I think it's about 6% on average now. That's what the budget is estimating, but I think it's literally more than that. Because when you go down to the supermarket, when you go down to the shops, the prices of goods and services is already increasing. Many of us know that our people who has no wage adjustment over the last 3 or 4 years are still paying for the price that is increasing of basic goods, rice, tin fish, and all something. This is reality, Mr. Speaker. And the Treasurer thinks that by assisting 500 million Kina and reducing wages tax is helping everybody. How many employees are in this country who are going to benefit from that, Mr. Speaker? Probably 150,000 people. Get your numbers, go check it, go to IRC and have a look before you make pronouncements. These are only 150,000. What about the rest of the 9.5 million people in this country? How are they benefiting from this budget where the cost of living is increasing, cost of prices are increasing, Mr. Speaker? So we have that situation where inflation is going up, interest rates are going up, business confidence is very low. So how long are we going to continue to do budget repair? So, Mr. Speaker, when you have a situation now, the Treasurer who continues to walk in and out because he's got no care for the country, you know. No care for the country. It comes late. This is the most important budget policy document for the government, you know. When you're serious about running this country, you sit there and listen. You sit there and listen. You have to be serious about your job. Decisions that you make affect 9 to 10 million people in this country.
Honorable